Chapter 51 Model Employee Lockhart. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Gilderoy Lockhart. Regulus repeated the name, testing it out. He'd been away from the wizarding world so long, the names escaped him. He frowned, rubbed his temple, and tried to dredge up a memory. It felt familiar. Who was this guy? Let me jog your memory, Sebastian said, drawing it out for effect. Think back to Hogwarts. Remember that unique character we ran into? Real special. Special, huh? That triggered something. An image flickered in Regulus's mind. Got it. Regulus said, tapping his fist into his palm. That Ravenclaw show-off. He was just starting when I was in 4th year. But as I recall, his grades weren't anything special, and his skills were just okay. Aside from the grandstanding, there wasn't much to him. Sebastian smirked. You're wrong about that. He's got a real way with words. Besides being obsessed with fame, he's got a rare talent. Anyway, it's getting late. Sebastian stood up. I'll introduce you when the time is right. Oh, and here's a little secret, his memory charms are top-notch. If you run into a competitor who's playing dirty, I could have Lockhart slip a little, play nice suggestion into their head. Sound good? All right, Regulus said, practically pushing Sebastian toward the door. Get home. Mia's probably waiting up. I'll try to handle things the Muggle way for now. But don't get me wrong, I'm not above asking for help if I run into someone truly awful. Back home, Sebastian didn't head straight to bed. He went to his study, found the letter Lockhart had written, and started reading. Lockhart was talented, all right, but also incredibly vain and hungry for attention. Sebastian constantly had to make sure Lockhart wasn't going too far. Truth be told, Sebastian was still puzzled by the Sorting Hat's decision to put Lockhart in Ravenclaw. Seemed like a prime Slytherin to him, the way he chased glory. Sebastian had kept an eye on Lockhart for 3 years after he started Hogwarts. Unlike most Ravenclaws, Lockhart didn't really care about knowledge, all he wanted was fame. He was always showing off, stirring up trouble, or making headlines. Students avoided him, and even the professors weren't too fond of him. If Sebastian hadn't remembered his previous life, he would have thought Lockhart was completely useless, but he clearly recalled that in the original book, Lockhart had a powerful memory charm and was also a famous writer. In the Harry Potter fan community of his previous life, when Lockhart was mentioned, everyone talked about his obliviation charm and the fact that he was a liar. People often overlooked the fact that he was a writer. It's true that the stories in Lockhart's books were stolen from other people, but many people overlooked the fact that Lockhart relied on his abilities to write these thrilling and fascinating stories. Sebastian had been planning to recruit him for his own use for a long time. After Lockhart graduated, he even had people watching his every move. He knew that Lockhart wouldn't be content to stay quiet. When Lockhart traveled to Armenia, Sebastian knew the time had come. He went to Armenia in person. When Lockhart was attacking an old Armenian wizard, he swooped down and caught him red-handed. Conquering Lockhart was simple, a little tough love followed by a sweet reward. With a bit of coercion and a promise of fame, Lockhart willingly became Sebastian's employee. Now, Lockhart was not only the most famous writer in the wizarding world, but also the head of Swann Media. Early the next morning, Sebastian hurried to Swann Media. He needed to have a chat with Lockhart. This was a crucial time for the company, and Sebastian had to keep a close eye on him. The moment he saw Lockhart, Sebastian felt a slight headache coming on. The guy was talented, yes, but so over the top. If you didn't watch him, he'd be in the headlines again. Sebastian. Lockhart boomed, flashing a huge grin. The winner of Which Weekly's Most Charming Smile is here to greet you. Aren't you honored? Lockhart adjusted his posture, trying to give Sebastian what he thought was his best angle. Sebastian ignored the smile and walked past him into Lockhart's office. How's Wandering with Werewolves coming? What's the status? Have you wrapped? Talking about work always got Lockhart excited. He practically bounced out of his chair. I've personally adapted Wandering with Werewolves into a 36-episode TV series. I'm directing and starring. When it hits the airwaves, I'll be the biggest star in the magical world. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Sebastian said, holding up his hands. Settle down. Let's talk like civilized people. It's already wrapped. Now we're in the final editing stage. Oh, and I want to shoot some promo posters. Could you take a look? Lockhart jumped up again and struck a series of poses. Does this make me look tall and handsome? How about a lone hero vibe? Or should we go with the smile as the selling point, that some people just can't be helped? Maybe it was just him, but Sebastian didn't think Lockhart looked handsome at all, just showy. He waved his hand, plastered on a smile, and stopped Lockhart again. You look great. Any of them will work. Maybe do a few different posters. Just remember to include the other actors, too. Don't hog the spotlight. You have vision, my friend. Lockhart said happily. The audience will be blown away by my performance. Suddenly, Lockhart's smile faded, and he gave Sebastian a pleading look. It's just a shame the character names aren't mine. They're all made up. If you hadn't stopped me, I would have modified that old Armenian wizard's memory and taken credit for the story. And I wouldn't have had to pay him a fortune in galleons. Now, everyone just sees me as a writer, not a powerful wizard. Lockhart clasped his hands together. Help me, Sebastian. I want people to know I'm a powerful wizard. I want to be even more famous. Chapter 52. Eat this big cake, you are still my good employee. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Sebastian glanced at Lockhart, a silent plea for help in his eyes. How many drinks had he had? Completely hammered. A powerful wizard, seriously? Did he have any clue about apparition charms? Don't even start, Sebastian said, rolling his eyes. I'm so overhearing that. Like I said before, anything you can solve with galleons isn't a real problem. This setup is gold. They dish the dirt, we dish out the galleons. All you gotta do is sprinkle some artistic fairy dust on it. Everybody wins. And hey, at least your fame is legit, kinda. You're rolling in it and famous. What's not to love? It's not enough. Lockhart roared, grabbing Sebastian's arm. His eyes burned into Sebastian's. I need more. I want to be mega famous. I don't even have an Order of Merlin. I want to be in the history books. I want the history of magic to have a whole freaking chapter on me. Here we go again, Sebastian sighed inwardly, trying to calm him down. You can't fake your way to the top. Let's be real about where you're at. Stealing memories is a ticking time bomb, you know. Lockhart, you don't want to get busted as a fraud and have your reputation trashed. Lockhart shivered, picturing the scene. He slumped back in his chair, mumbling, but you promised. You said if I played along, you'd make me a star. Famous with wizards and muggles. Okay, look, there's a workaround, Sebastian said, crossing his legs. We just need to crank up the volume. The muggle thing's a slow burn, gotta be patient. But the wizarding world? We can work some magic there. Sebastian leaned back, talking to Lockhart like a therapist. Think about it, what are you actually good at? Smiling? Playing the part? Writing? Lockhart looked genuinely puzzled. Writing. Sebastian slammed the table, making Lockhart jump. I remember those papers you cranked out back in school were pretty solid. Okay, yeah, you went off the rails eventually, but that's because you were senioritis personified. It only went downhill when your brain couldn't keep up with your writing. Your professors loved your stuff when you were an underclassman. Ha, Lockhart muttered, what a load of. That's fake news. Sebastian glared at Lockhart, shutting him up. Now that I'm a professor, I've realized Hogwarts has a problem. Sebastian looked genuinely concerned, sighing dramatically. First-year students can't write papers to save their lives. The professors are losing their minds. I mean, they're thrown into the deep end, right? They haven't had any training. Expecting them to write a paper right off the bat is a total mug's game. So, Sebastian said, his face serious, I'm thinking of starting a writing course at Hogwarts, just for the first years, maybe 2 months long. Sebastian looked at Lockhart significantly. And as for who should teach it? Me. Pick me. Me. Lockhart perked up, pointing at himself wildly. Nobody's better for the job. Lockhart was ecstatic. Professor at Hogwarts. He hadn't even dared to dream that big. Helping a bunch of first highs write papers. Easy peasy. They would be lining up to see him. It's only 2 months, but that's fine. This is a chance to boost his name recognition every year, plus, it's not like it's magic intensive. Perfect. Relax, your family. You get first dibs. Sebastian emphasized first dibs. Lockhart got the message instantly, sitting up straight and promising complete obedience. To get the big job, you gotta prove you can handle it. Sebastian looked stern. I need you to nail something first, prove you've got what it takes. Name it. Lockhart said, puffing out his chest. Swann Media's been running for a minute, but the Daily Prophet is still eating our lunch. I want you to take Swann Media to the next level and turn the Prophet into yesterday's news within 6 months. At the same time, you can't slack on your film projects. Quality and quantity, got it? Think you can handle it? Lockhart hesitated, looking doubtful. He thought hard, then gritted his teeth and made up his mind. He had to go for it. He couldn't let this opportunity slide. Sebastian always took care of his own. If he nailed this, his fame would go through the roof. The Daily Prophet was going down. Lockhart immediately launched into action, rattling off his plans. I'm pushing back the release of Wandering with Werewolves. It'll premiere the day Hogwarts lets out for Christmas. 8 p.m. every night, 2 episodes back to back. As soon as the kids are home, they'll be hooked and drag their parents in too. And don't forget the kids who stay at school. Bored out of their minds. We can get the magic TVs in the Great Hall playing the show to entertain them. We'll be swimming in loyal viewers by New Year's. And the catchphrase, Wandering with Werewolves, 8 p.m., be there or be square. Sebastian watched Lockhart, who was practically glowing with excitement, and felt a pang of, well, something. He had to hand it to the guy. Lockhart had his issues, but he never stopped hustling. Of course, he usually hustled in the wrong direction. If it weren't for Sebastian, Lockhart would still be a con artist. He never gave up on his dreams of fame. If one door slammed shut, he'd kick down another one. If an opportunity came knocking, he'd throw a party for it. He was relentlessly persistent. A lot of kids, wizards or otherwise, could learn from that. Some of the young wizards he'd met were lazy or whiny. He actually respected guys like Lockhart more. Life's about finding your niche, finding what makes you tick and running with it. Everyone has something they're good at, potential that's just waiting to be unlocked. It might not be obvious at first, but if you keep exploring, keep trying, you'll find your path. Yeah, you'll stumble, you'll fall, but those are just lessons learned. So, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, don't give up. Every effort, every bit of grit, is a building block. Believe in yourself, keep a positive attitude. Believe in yourself, and tackle life's ups and downs with courage. Believe in yourself, find where you shine brightest, and you'll find real meaning in life. P.S. Please comment, like, urge for updates, everything. Thank you so much. Chapter 54, Professor, Eat Shit. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Fred was having a truly awful day. To avoid getting booted off the Alchemy team by Professor Swann, he and George had been burning the midnight oil, working like dogs. Back in the dorm, he'd barely touched his pillow before he was out cold, like he'd been hit with a sleeping charm. It had been ages since he'd had a good old-fashioned night tour or any Hogwarts adventures after dark, so, when Easter break finally rolled around, he and George decided to cut loose and have a wild night. They got their adventure, all right, but Fred wasn't sure if he'd enjoyed it or not. All he knew was he ached all over. When Professor Robert first dragged him into the Forbidden Forest, Fred was terrified. He figured the worst that could happen if they got caught was losing house points. He and George hadn't lost any points in ages, and they'd actually earned a ton for Gryffindor, or maybe a lecture from Professor McGonagall. Not the end of the world, the absolute worst. A howler from Mrs. Weasley. He never expected to get zapped by a spell the second they got near the forest, a professor attacking a student. He wanted to yell, but as Professor Robert hauled him deeper into the trees, real fear set in. Fred worried he might actually get killed. Anything could happen in the Forbidden Forest, so, when Professor Robert took his wand and released the spell, he stood up and followed along, meek as a lamb. Professor Robert was acting nothing like his usual self, and to top it off, it was pitch black in the Forbidden Forest. He couldn't see Professor Robert's face at all, which only made his fear worse. Like a giant weight pressing down on his chest, he just silently prayed that George would realize what was going on and find a more powerful professor to help, if only Professor McGonagall would show up. Or even Professor Flitwick would be great. Fred stumbled through the Forbidden Forest, Professor Robert yanking him by the collar, his clothes getting snagged on the bushes. The long gash on his left arm, courtesy of Professor Robert, kept getting reopened. Every so often, the professor would slice the wound again and use the blood for some kind of magic. Figuring out which way to go, Fred was starting to feel seriously resentful. Wasn't the Forbidden Forest supposed to be crawling with dangerous creatures? Weren't there centaurs patrolling, strictly forbidding wizards from entering? Wasn't there supposed to be werewolves lurking deep inside? Why was it so quiet? In the vast Forbidden Forest, there wasn't even a bird chirping, just Professor Robert's muttering. "Tough luck, kid, running into me. Don't even think about yelling for help, nobody can hear you." Robert pulled out a pendant hanging around his neck, showing it off. "See this? It's a magical trinket I bought overseas for a fortune over Christmas. It blocks all sound and smells within 30 yards. Plus, it mimics a dragon's scent, keeps the magical creatures away. Pretty handy in the Forbidden Forest." That he tucked the pendant back under his collar, then eyed the wound on Fred's arm with a greedy look. "I've wanted to try this for ages, but Dumbledore keeps a close watch on the school. I've never had the chance. I owe you one. If you hadn't followed me, I wouldn't have gone through with it." Ha ha ha. Robert's laugh was a little choked, a little unhinged. "Merlin's beard, what luck that the kid who followed me is a Gryffindor. Today, I will succeed. Well, that explains it. No wonder they hadn't run into any magical creatures. He was carrying this treasure with him. This would be amazing for night tours." The further they went, the more Fred relaxed, a little. At least they hadn't stumbled across any dangerous magical creatures, otherwise, he'd definitely be used as bait. Crazy Professor Robert didn't seem like the type to save anyone. After who knows how long, they finally reached the heart of the Forbidden Forest. The trees grew thicker and thicker here, so dense that you could barely see the sky. They pushed through some bushes, and Fred's eyes widened. A wide, flat clearing lay before them. In the center of the clearing stood a massive boulder. Robert's eyes lit up and he practically skipped to the boulder. Was this their destination? Fred watched, puzzled, as Robert circled the rock. After a couple of turns, Robert dragged Fred over to the boulder, reopened his wound, and smeared the blood on it, like some kind of sacrifice. Then, he pointed his wand at the boulder and started muttering. "Sanguine Gryffindorum, ostium hereditatis appuriator. Use the blood of Gryffindor students to open the door to the inherited treasure." Slowly, a gate made of yellow light appeared on the boulder. Robert didn't stop casting until the door was fully formed. "I've finally found you." With that, he threw his arms wide and charged towards the door, looking like a madman. Boom. Robert bounced off. "What? How is that possible?" He was stunned. "Why can't I get in?" Robert charged the light gate again and again, only to be thrown back each time. "I don't believe it. I know. It must not be enough blood." He whirled around, his eyes fixed on Fred, his face contorted with rage. "Get over here." Fred's stomach dropped. Professor Robert had officially lost it. He knew he couldn't get through, but he kept slamming into it anyway. Now he wanted Fred to come forward and donate more blood. What if the crazy plan failed next time? This was getting too dangerous. No way. He couldn't just stand there and wait to die. He had to escape this lunatic. Maybe he had a chance in the Forbidden Forest, but staying here meant certain death. With that thought, Fred pretended to be scared and edged towards Professor Robert, shaking like a leaf. At the same time, he slipped his right hand into his pocket and grabbed a dung bomb. "Hurry up." Ignoring Robert's furious urging, Fred waited for the perfect moment. 3 steps. 2 steps. 1 step. Fred stood in front of Robert and lifted his left arm, trembling. While Robert was staring at the wound, Fred suddenly lashed out with his right hand, smashing the dung bomb into Robert's face. "Eat dirt." Fred spun around and ran, not expecting much from the dung bomb. He just hoped it would buy him 10 seconds. No. Just 5 seconds. If he could just get back into the trees, he could use the terrain to his advantage against Professor Robert. Fred's plan wasn't bad, but he'd forgotten how much taller the professor was. He'd only taken a couple of steps when Robert grabbed the back of his robes. Before he could struggle, he was slammed to the ground. Fred's vision blurred. He was too weak to fight back. Ugh. Robert gagged, reaching down to grab Fred by the collar and haul him to his feet. He held his wand in his right hand, pressing the tip hard against Fred's cheek. "You little sneak, why couldn't you just be honest? Wouldn't it have been easier to just donate some blood? Since you don't value your life, this place is yours." "Enough." A low voice cut through the air, and a spell with a red glow shot out from the bushes, slamming into the clearing next to Robert as a warning. Snape's figure emerged from the trees like a ghost, wand in hand, expressionless. He pointed the tip of his wand directly at Robert, his cold, emotionless voice ringing out. Tonight's little drama ends here. Chapter 55, Snape, let the students go, come to me. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Professor Snape, Fred yelled, surprised. He never expected Snape to be the one to rescue him. As a Gryffindor, he had plenty of reasons to hate Snape. He hated Snape's black robes and his monotone voice, but right now, Fred thought Snape was awesome. Even the way he pointed his wand was cool. Though, Fred noticed Snape looked a little flustered. He was breathing hard, like he'd been running. His black robe was torn and hung in tatters. His pants were ripped, showing glimpses of skin. Up close, there were bits of what looked like spiderwebs clinging to him. Despite all that, Fred still thought Snape was radiating awesomeness. Compared to the excited Fred, Snape looked calm and collected, his face a blank slate. After George got the message to him, he'd immediately headed into the Forbidden Forest to find them. It didn't take long. He found their tracks as soon as he entered. He figured it would be a quick and easy rescue. He hadn't counted on all the crap he'd run into along the way: griffins, unicorns, hordes of acromantulas, centaurs. He'd even crossed paths with a werewolf. While these magical creatures were no match for Snape, they had slowed him down. Snape was annoyed. He hadn't seen any signs of a struggle, which meant these two hadn't run into any trouble. After fighting his way through all that, he was out of breath when he finally found them, and Fred was already in danger. He'd been too hasty, and his spell had missed its mark, which pissed Snape off even more. What Snape didn't know was that it was all Robert's fault. Thanks to the alchemy pendant, all the magical animals had been scared off, only returning to their territories after Fred and Robert had passed. So, when Snape came along, the cranky creatures took their frustrations out on him. Bad luck, plain and simple. Snape's mouth was a tight line. Anyone who knew him knew that meant he was barely containing his anger. Seeing Snape approach, his face expressionless, Robert ducked behind Fred. He grabbed Fred with one hand, shoved him forward, pointed his wand at Snape, and yelled, looking like a maniac. Expelliarmus! Colloportus! Confringo! Snape kept walking, casually deflecting the spells. He stared at Robert with dead eyes and said, "The show's over. Drop your wand. You can't win. Don't be stupid." He, Robert cackled, staring at Snape, his face twisted. "Severus Snape, the infamous Death Eater, here you are. I've been waiting for this." Robert's voice got louder, hurting Fred's ears. "I've always wanted to curse you and make you suffer. Stop. Don't come any closer." Robert pressed his wand against Fred's face. "Professor Snape, you don't want this kid getting hurt." "Oh. You want to make me suffer?" Snape stopped cold, 2 meters away from Robert, like a statue. "Let the student go, and I'll give you the chance." Ha 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 ha. Robert was losing it, laughing until he cried. "Give me a chance. I admit, I underestimated you. I can't beat you. But you seem to have forgotten something. Robert's left hand squeezed Fred's neck, making him cry out in pain. Drop your wand, or I'll use the Cruciatus curse on him. Robert's threat didn't faze Snape. He said calmly. I'm the evil Death Eater you mentioned. You think I'd drop my wand for a student and risk my life? Snape glanced at the boulder behind Robert. You're here for that stone. Care to guess if it'll survive my full force attack? You wouldn't. Robert screamed. Don't you care about your student? Wanna bet? Hearing Snape's unwavering voice, Robert hesitated. According to the legends, that boulder was tied to Gryffindor. It shouldn't be destroyed lightly, but he didn't dare risk it. He'd poured so much time and money into this. He'd bet everything, he couldn't take that chance. Robert was afraid of pushing Snape too far and having him destroy the boulder, so he didn't attack Fred. Looking at Robert using Fred as a shield, Snape wasn't sure he could take him out in one shot, so he held back. Stalemate. Seeing the standstill, Fred decided to take things into his own hands. He winked at Snape to get his attention, then, carefully, he slipped his right hand into his pocket and grabbed the last dung bomb. He exhaled and, with a flick of the wrist, tossed the bomb behind his head. Splat. The dung bomb exploded, unleashing a wave of stink. Bullseye. Robert's eyes flickered from Fred just long enough to see something flying towards his face. Yellow gunk streamed down, blurring his vision. Robert panicked, blinded, enraged. He shoved Fred towards Snape and, at the same time, fired a curse at Fred with his wand. Accio disperso. When Snape saw Fred wink, he knew this was his chance. Seeing the dung bomb hit Robert, he raised his wand to strike, but then he saw Fred being pushed towards him, and the flash of dark magic behind him. If he kept attacking Robert, he'd get him for sure, but Fred would get hit. In a split second, Snape reacted without thinking. He unleashed his spell and shoved Fred out of the way. Pain exploded in his chest, and then he slammed into the ground. Professor Snape. Seeing Snape fall, silent, Fred scrambled up, terrified. Was that curse meant for me? Thinking of Snape pushing him out of the way, Fred was overcome with emotion. He crawled to Snape's side. He helped Snape sit up, leaning him against his body, and then he saw his hands covered in blood. Professor, you're bleeding everywhere. Fred cried. Ha 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 ha. I win. Robert, wiping the gunk from his eyes, pointed his wand at Snape, laughing like a madman. Snape, you went soft. I'm the winner. I told you I would make you suffer. Accio disperso. Professor Snape. Just then, a spell came flying from a distance. As Fred screamed, a thick wall of ice sprang up, blocking them from Robert. Robert's spell splattered harmlessly against it. Sorry, but you're not torturing Snape. Sebastian's angry voice echoed. Because your next opponent is me. Professor Robert. Chapter 56. Professor Robert, please please me. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Before Sebastian could even finish, he swooped in front of Fred on his broom. In a heartbeat, the fear on Fred's face vanished, replaced by surprise and a shot of excitement. Awesome! Professor Swann's here. But the surprise didn't last. Fred was soon consumed by a fresh wave of worry. This asterisk was the defense against the dark arts professor. Can Professor Swann actually win? If only Professor McGonagall or Flitwick had shown up. Sorry I'm late, Sebastian said gently, pulling up beside Fred. Don't sweat it. I got this. Professor, be careful. Professor Robert's a dark wizard. He just used some dark magic. Dark wizard, huh? I used to be an Auror. Haven't busted a dark wizard in ages. I'm practically starving for one. Sebastian pulled out a couple of potions and shoved them into Fred's hands. Fred, Snape's life is in your hands now. First, get him the skill grow and blood replenishing potion, then pour that distilled essence on his chest to stop the bleeding. After that, I'm gonna let Professor Robert have it. The professor used to be an Auror. Fred felt a wave of relief wash over him. He grabbed the blood replenishing potion and held it to Snape's lips. Professor Snape, wake up and drink this. Sebastian stood, waved his hand, and the ice wall vanished. He fixed Robert with a slightly menacing grin. "Professor Robert, my friends and students are seriously hurt. I am not happy. So, next time, put up a decent fight, okay? Otherwise, I might accidentally beat you to death." Robert let out a disbelieving laugh. "Who do you think you are? Dumbledore?" He looked at Sebastian, mocking him. "Just because you're a Muggle studies professor? I was just giving your students some real-world experience. You really think I'm scared of you? Come on, then. Let's see you try and beat me to death. Break my bones and tear out my flesh." A spell hit Sebastian, and the buttons on his cuffs shattered and fell to the ground. A protective charm. Robert's expression changed as he watched Sebastian standing there, unfazed. "I want to see how many charms you've got. Break bones and dig out flesh. Break bones and dig out flesh. Break bones and dig out flesh." A series of spells slammed into Sebastian, but it was like throwing pebbles into the ocean. They did nothing. Sebastian brushed off his sleeves and gave Robert a dismissive smirk. "Professor Robert. I gave you a chance, but you're useless. Your spells are as weak as water trickling from a leaky faucet. You couldn't even break 2 buttons." Sebastian's words sent Robert into a fury. "Fine, you've got protective gear. I'll just attack the 2 on the ground and see what you do then." Thunderbolt explosion. Robert's pupils shrank. To his shock, as soon as he raised his wand, Sebastian stepped in front of the spell and effortlessly deflected it. Again. Snape managed to block his curse earlier, but how could this Muggle studies professor do the same thing? Robert never imagined things could go so wrong. He watched the black-haired professor casually block spell after spell as he walked towards him. Robert's mind went blank. His face went from disbelief to frustration. He didn't know what to do. He's saying my attacks are weak. But his arms were burning from casting so many spells. He desperately fired every dark magic spell he knew at Sebastian. But the other man just blocked them without breaking stride. This can't be happening. He's just a professor of Muggle studies. If he's so strong, why isn't he teaching defense against the dark arts? Cold sweat trickled down Robert's forehead. He started looking for an escape route. Escape, the thought flashed through his mind and immediately took over. Apparate. Robert stood there, dumbfounded. He hadn't moved an inch. "What the?" "Sorry, but to keep you from running, I cast an anti-apparition charm while I was freezing Snape and the others." Robert reacted quickly, casting a smoke screen and bolting for the bushes at the edge of the clearing. "Running isn't going to help you. Might as well stay put. God of Fire, clear the way." After a couple of steps, Robert felt a wave of heat coming from behind him. Then, a massive dragon made of fire tore through the smoke screen and cornered him. The road was blocked. Robert's right leg froze. A wall of flame stood before him and on either side, he could feel the heat singeing his hair. He turned to see Sebastian standing just a few feet away. Before Robert could say anything, the grass beneath his feet twisted into ropes as thick as thumbs and bound him. A transfiguration spell. How can he do it so silently? Professor Robert, Sebastian's voice was cold. From what I understand, you've always been a Dumbledore supporter. You never joined the Order of the Phoenix, but you were always against the Dark Lord. So, you should be an upright person. Dumbledore wouldn't have hired you otherwise. Can you tell me why? Robert's eyes were bloodshot. He struggled like an animal caught in a trap. When he realized there was no escape, he started cursing, his rage filling the air. Dumbledore's a hypocritical snake. I trusted him, and it destroyed my family. He said no hexes, no killing curses, and I listened. But what happened? Death Eaters were freed by their agents in the Ministry, over and over. Dumbledore could have killed them all. If he had, my family wouldn't have been tortured to death. We already won. The Dark Lord was killed by the boy who lived. Robert's voice cracked, and his roar turned hoarse. It's been 10 years. Do you know how I've lived? Every time I see the families lying in their beds at St. Mungo's, it tears me apart. I hated myself for not being ruthless enough, so I studied dark magic. I wanted to kill all the Death Eaters. Robert's eyes locked on Sebastian. I was so close. I found Gryffindor's secret. I was about to get unimaginable power. Please, Sebastian, let me go. We're on the same side. I did all of this to kill the bad guys. Sebastian's eyes narrowed. He wasn't moved by Robert's words. I don't believe you, Professor Robert. I saw the wound on Fred's arm. I told you I was going to let them have their pound of flesh. I wanted to beat you to a pulp with my own bare hands, but your face is so filthy, I don't want to get my hands dirty. Sebastian pulled a baseball bat from his bag and grinned at Robert, who stared back in horror. Professor Robert, try to hang in there. Don't die on me. Chapter 57 Who is the Chosen One? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. After taking an unholy beating, Sebastian finally cooled off. Wow, you're a better talker than a singer. He went on about wanting to kill all the Death Eaters and every other bad guy out there. With so many Death Eaters locked up in Azkaban, why don't they bust in and get revenge? Whenever someone managed to off Bella or someone like that, Sebastian would give them a thumbs up and call them a hero. If breaking into Azkaban is too risky, then Lucius and the other pureblood Death Eaters are still kicking around in the wizarding world, why not stir up some trouble for them? All this time has passed, and Sebastian hasn't heard of a single pureblood Death Eater getting taken out. Even if we compromise, even if we want to build up our strength, attacking students is a no-go. What's that all about? It's classic bullying the weak and kissing up to the strong. Bottom line, he's just a coward, a pathetic creature driven by hate. Sebastian strode over to Fred and tossed the bat at his feet. Want to take a few swings and blow off some steam? Fred looked at Professor Robert, whose head had been turned into a pig's, and shook his head like crazy. He seemed to be trying to scramble his brains evenly. Professor Swann's a beast. But I gotta admit, I'm into it. Who knew Professor Swann was so tough? Beating Professor Robert was like taking candy from a baby. Fred watched Sebastian eagerly, waiting for the next move. Sebastian glanced at Snape, who was sitting on the ground, catching his breath. Severus, how you holding up? Can you move? Snape had completely relaxed when Sebastian showed up, but his chest was a mess, and he couldn't get a word out back then. After chugging the potion Sebastian handed him, his body was basically fine. As for the chest, just a scratch. I'm good. Wasn't anything too dark. I'll live. Snape struggled to his feet and cracked a joke at Sebastian. I seem to recall you saying that torching a mountain would get me life in prison. He pointed at the flames all around them and forced a smile. So why aren't you sweating a life sentence today? Hearing their back and forth, Fred's eyes popped open like dinner plates. Was that Professor Snape? Unbelievable. Professor Snape just made a joke. As Sebastian waved his wand to put out the fire, he grumbled at Snape, I gave you all that protective gear. Why don't you ever wear it? Going down like that against such a nobody. Fred's anxiety flared up at Sebastian's complaints. In his mind, Professor Snape, who risked his neck to save him, was the coolest guy ever tonight. If Professor Robert hadn't been so sneaky, Snape would have mopped the floor with him. Professor Swann's words were totally off base. He jumped in to defend Snape. That's not true. It was my fault. I slowed Professor Snape down. Besides, Professor Robert was a real piece of work, using me as a human shield. Otherwise, Professor Snape would have won easy. Seeing their surprised faces, Fred's voice got quieter and quieter. I'm right, aren't I? Sebastian was a bit taken aback. He hadn't expected Fred, a die-hard anti-Slytherin in the books, to stick up for Snape like that. He grinned and ruffled Fred's hair before raising an eyebrow at Snape. Shall we go see what the hall is tonight? The three of them headed to a gate made of yellow light on the rock, ready to explore what lay beyond. As they got closer, Fred noticed a line of tiny words, no bigger than fly specks, next to the gate. They were kind of hard to see under the yellow glow, Only with the courage and determination to carry the whole world on your shoulders can you step into this door to the unknown. Watching the two professors study the glowing gate, Fred hesitated for a sec, then voiced his concerns. "Professor, you might need my blood to open this door." "That's what Professor Robert did earlier." "No way." Sebastian shot down Fred's idea immediately. "If this door is linked to Gryffindor, it wouldn't need some nasty blood sacrifice. He's one of the founders of Hogwarts, a true legend with a big heart. Robert must have used some shady magic to fire up this door. That's not how it's supposed to work." He glanced at Fred, who looked eager, and egged him on. "Want to give it a shot?" Fred was practically buzzing with excitement. "Who wouldn't be? Professor Robert said this door was connected to Gryffindor and could grant great power. It was probably a treasure left behind by Gryffindor himself." He looked over at the two professors, feeling a little smug. He wasn't trying to compete with the professors, especially since they had just saved his life, but who was more worthy of Gryffindor's treasure than him? I mean, of the three people here, two were Slytherins, and he was the only Gryffindor. Bingo. That's it. Jackpot. Tonight's adventure was so worth it. He looked up at Sebastian, and with a nod of encouragement, he walked towards the glowing door. Ouch! Fred ran headfirst into it and bounced back, landing on the ground in a squat. He rubbed his head, sighing inwardly, "Well, guess I'm not getting any treasure." Seeing Fred get rejected by the glowing gate, Sebastian started thinking, it couldn't be that simple, could it? Yeah, if it were that easy, someone would have gotten their hands on this treasure a long time ago. 1,000 years had gone by, and some lucky Gryffindor must have stumbled across the stone during that time. Plus, back when Hogwarts was just starting, there was still a little bit of a mentor-apprentice vibe going on. Back then, Gryffindor students were practically apprentices of Gryffindor himself. If there was no test, why wouldn't he just pass it on to his students? He looked back at the little words next to the gate. "The courage to carry the world on your shoulders." Sebastian thought for a minute and turned to the two of them. "It's gotta be about courage. Think of the bravest thing you've ever done and give it another try." Hearing Professor Swann's explanation, Fred jumped to his feet. He went over everything he had done in his life in his head, and then he stretched out his hands carefully and pushed towards the gate. His hands were zapped away again. He was bummed. He thought he was brave enough. Didn't facing death count as courage? Cheapskate Gryffindor. Compared to Fred, Snape was much calmer. He felt that his courage wasn't great. It was too small to carry the world. It could only keep Lily in his heart. However, if it were for Lily, his courage could become infinite. After thinking it over, he didn't feel that his courage matched the signs, so, in response to Sebastian's invitation, he shook his head slightly. "I'm not interested in Gryffindor's treasure." Seeing the two of them give up, Sebastian straightened his clothes, walked to the light door, and gently reached out his hand. In a blink, Fred saw Professor Swann disappear, and he was crushed. Gryffindor's blind. "If you didn't pick me, fine, but how could a Slytherin enter the treasure room? But thinking about it again, does that mean Professor Swann's also a Gryffindor? That's a way to look at it. Wow." At this time, Sebastian had arrived at the gate of Hogwarts, standing in front of the pure white castle. This feeling, why does it look like a hazy fantasy in the movies? As he looked around, the castle gate opened and a tall man with red hair and a beard walked out. Looking at the familiar-looking man, Sebastian blurted out. "Godric Gryffindor. You're still alive." Chapter 58, Did Slytherin Eat Your Rice? You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Gryffindor. Still around? Sebastian was floored. 1,000 years? How was that even possible? If Voldemort had known the secret to immortality was hanging out in the Forbidden Forest, he'd have been kicking himself, because this was his ultimate goal. "I am a Gryffindor, but Gryffindor is not me," the red-faced, burly man answered Sebastian with a burst of energy. "I'm just a memory Gryffindor left behind. Don't overthink it. Think of me like the Sorting Hat, except I'm a special item, a collection of all our thoughts. And I'm a memory Gryffindor himself preserved using magic from the dark forest." That explained a lot. Sebastian finally understood. No wonder something felt off. So, this Gryffindor's body was pure magic, but the memories were his own. What a crazy technique. Before Sebastian could even comment, Gryffindor frowned. Why a Slytherin kid? This is wild. The one to find my inheritance isn't even from Gryffindor. Could it be that Gryffindor students these days just don't have the guts to venture into the depths of the dark forest? That he sighed, then gave Sebastian a dark look, clearly not thrilled. Sebastian bristled. What was wrong with Slytherin students? Did he have a problem with them? Why all the Slytherin shade? How do you know I'm from Slytherin? Sebastian challenged. I'm not wearing Slytherin robes. Students sorted by the sorting hat make a kind of pact with their house. I can spot which house you're from a mile away. What? Gryffindor sneered at Sebastian. Trying to pass yourself off as a Gryffindor? No way, kid. Gryffindor's dismissive tone made Sebastian's temples throb. Seriously? Did Gryffindors think they were all that? Was he supposed to grovel and pretend to be one of them? If Gryffindor wasn't a founder of Hogwarts, he would tell him straight, I'm a Slytherin, and proud of it. I represent Slytherin. But picking a fight with this relic was a bad idea. Slytherins were known for being adaptable. For the sake of Gryffindor's inheritance, he could swallow his pride. The dark forest you're talking about? We call it the Forbidden Forest now. Students aren't allowed to go there. You'd be waiting a long time for a Gryffindor to show up. Besides, Sebastian straightened up, Slytherins are brave too. And Slytherins are Hogwarts students, aren't they? So, I'm your student too. You can't just shut me out because I'm a Slytherin. I passed your test. Gryffindor laughed, clearly amused by Sebastian's reaction. If this Slytherin had acted all sycophantic, trying to brown-nose him, Gryffindor would have told him to get lost, but the kid stood his ground, spoke his mind, and showed some guts. Gryffindor had to respect that. Alright, I was wrong. Forget being a Slytherin. If you've got the courage to take on the world, it doesn't matter if you're not even a Hogwarts student. I'm a Gryffindor. Gryffindor's face turned serious, his magical energy began to surge, and he stared at Sebastian with burning eyes, like a lion sizing up its prey. You want my inheritance? Then hit me with everything you've got, kid. Let's see what you're made of. Let's learn through combat. A long sword of pure magic appeared in Gryffindor's right hand, and a wand materialized in his left. He crouched slightly, pointing the sword at Sebastian, ready to strike. Let me show you how the greatest melee wizard does it. Suddenly, Sebastian felt like all the magic in the area had been locked down. The waves of power rolling off Gryffindor made him feel like he was in the ocean, facing a monstrous swell. Was this what the most powerful wizard from 1,000 years ago was like? Bring it on! Sebastian's eyes lit up, his wand appearing in his hand in a flash. He glared at Gryffindor, ready for the fight. Melee wizard, huh? Funny enough, he'd picked up a few martial arts moves back in the East. The two locked eyes, and Sebastian fired 3 spells at Gryffindor. The spells formed a triangle, blocking any escape. To Sebastian's surprise, Gryffindor didn't dodge. He charged straight ahead. He slashed one spell out of the air with his sword, then let the other 2 hit him. A shield charm flared into existence, deflecting the spells. Wait a minute. Something was off about that shield. It appeared instantly, with no sign of Gryffindor casting, and Sebastian was sure it wasn't wandless magic. Plus, the way it deflected the spells felt weird. Sebastian got the sense that the shield was incredibly dense. It felt like he'd hit a real suit of armor. Was this Gryffindor's signature move? A moment's hesitation, and Gryffindor was at his side, swinging his sword with lightning speed. Pay attention, kid. I'm channeling the magic of the entire Forbidden Forest. Don't underestimate me just because I'm not a Gryffindor student anymore. Sebastian twisted away from the blow, dodging back to create some distance. Then, he started kiting Gryffindor, pelting him with spells from afar. If you're a ranged fighter facing a melee fighter, you kite, or you're gonna have a bad time. After a few exchanges, Sebastian started to catch on. It seemed like Gryffindor's shield charm had more than one layer. It was more like he was stacking iron armor spells on top of each other, creating layers of defense. Suddenly, an idea struck him. He decided to test his most powerful spell. Defindo Maxima. As if sensing his plan, Gryffindor simply stood there, letting the spell hit him. The superpowered severing charm sliced through the outermost layer of the shield, but it lost steam and failed to break through the entire defense, so this was the foundation of the greatest melee wizard. Something clicked for Sebastian. No wonder Gryffindor liked using swords to take down enemies. With a shell like that, he could tank most spells. And with his incredibly sharp goblin-made sword, while everyone else was standing back, shooting spells at each other, Gryffindor would charge straight in, ignoring the spells and attacking point blank. Back then, news didn't travel fast, and most wizards would be caught totally off guard, leaving them wide open. Seeing Sebastian try his best, Gryffindor laughed. Now you get it. This is my inheritance, my signature move, the Iron Armor spell. Analyze it, feel it. Break through your limits in battle and learn this technique. Slytherin boy, I'm gonna enjoy training you. Chapter 59, Alchemy in the Guise of a Spell. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. How long have you been keeping this from me? Why do you get so hyped up when a fight breaks out? Seeing Gryffindor's aggressive stance, Sebastian held up his hands, signaling him to stop. Hold on. That the sudden interruption clearly annoyed Gryffindor, who was itching for a fight, eyes wide, hair and beard practically standing on end. He roared at Sebastian like an enraged lion. What's the deal, kid? You don't have the guts to fight me, do you? You're a real letdown. Sebastian quickly waved his hands. I just think your teaching method isn't cutting it. I need a different approach. Hearing Sebastian criticize his teaching, Gryffindor lost it. Oh, really? Gryffindor asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Then, by all means, enlighten me, O wise one. How should I teach? Sebastian caught the sarcasm, but he knew his own strengths. When it came to spells, he had a unique learning method, 100% imitation. With his knack for sensing magic, he could quickly copy any spell he saw cast. He gave the angry Gryffindor a slight smile and boasted, just show me how it's done, and I'll learn it just by watching. You think you can learn it just by watching? Get outta here. Typical Slytherin trickery. He's just afraid of getting his butt kicked. Seeing Gryffindor's yeah right expression, Sebastian quickly added, I promise, I can master your spell stacking technique after seeing it just once. Impossible. Absolutely impossible. Gryffindor insisted, waving his hands. If you learned it in 3 days, that'd be a natural talent. Back in my day, learning it in 2 days was considered top-notch. If I could learn it in 1 day. What if I did learn it in 1 day? Sebastian asked, intrigued. I'd give you the thumbs up and say, you're amazing. Gryffindor rolled his eyes. I've taught this to tons of students. Only a handful can pick it up in 3 days, and most never master it at all. And you're saying you can learn it just by watching? Ha! Seeing Gryffindor looking skyward with disbelief, Sebastian took a step forward, employing his go-to method of provocation. What's wrong, Gryffindor? You don't even dare to try. No way. You wouldn't. Sebastian feigned innocence. The founder of Hogwarts is too chicken to even try. That got to Gryffindor. His face darkened instantly, his magic started to bubble up again, pressing down on Sebastian in waves. How dare he question his courage? Let's be clear. If you don't learn it after one look, I'm going to beat you senseless to blow off steam. And let me tell you, during our sparring just now, I wasn't using any real spells. I was just toying with you using fighting skills. Watch carefully, boy. Gryffindor managed to say, barely containing his anger. I'm going to show you slowly, so pay attention. Though furious, he was meticulous in his demonstration, explaining the key points without holding back. You need to focus on how the first Iron Armor spell ends. You slow down the magic at the end, then use absolute control to connect it directly to the second Iron Armor spell. There are 2 tricky parts, Gryffindor said, glaring at Sebastian, the speed at which the magic slows down and maintaining absolute control over your own magic. Mess that up, and you'll end up with 2 separate armor spells. Don't underestimate it, Gryffindor raised his voice, this is just the first step, the very foundation. What comes next is key. The trick to repetitive spells is the repetition of the words. Watch my technique. Sebastian didn't dare to take Gryffindor's personal lesson lightly, he watched Gryffindor's every move intently. At the same time, he cranked up his magical perception to its maximum, carefully savoring every flow of magic. He sensed Gryffindor controlling every movement with precision, like a strongman using a needle to embroider. The iron armor spell stacked layer upon layer, like a work of art, elegant and robust. Sebastian suddenly had an insight, this layering technique is similar to how magic circuits are depicted in alchemy. No wonder it's so difficult, this spell is alchemy disguised as magic. Without some basic knowledge of alchemy, learning this is a pipe dream, but that explains why the stacked spell is so strong, it's like Muggle chainmail. Gryffindor used a single armor spell as the foundation to weave a powerful armor unique to wizards. Incredible. Gryffindor really is one of the most famous wizards in history, only now did Sebastian truly understand the weight of the name Gryffindor. Okay, watch this last step. Gryffindor's shout snapped Sebastian out of his thoughts. He looked up and saw the 9th shield charm nearing completion. With a flick of Gryffindor's wand, the 9th spell was done. Along with the first 8 shield charms, it connected to form a single whole. That's the stacking spell. 9 iron armor spells linked together as one layer. The more layers, the stronger the defense. In theory, you can stack it infinitely, making your defense infinitely strong. But be warned, each layer requires more and more control. If you aren't careful, you'll mess it all up. Gryffindor paused, looking meaningfully at Sebastian. Doesn't it seem like a lot of trouble? Besides being more defensive, it's not as flexible as a single armor spell, right? Sebastian nodded in agreement. In a real fight, there's no time to stack spells layer by layer, and one mistake undoes all the work. Not practical. Not really practical at all. Is this some old school magic or something? Unless, you could prepare these overlapping spells in advance and have them last. Seeing Sebastian's sudden realization, Gryffindor laughed. It is a hassle, but once the stacking spell is formed, it creates its own magic circuit. Then, it absorbs ambient magic and remains stable. You can prepare it ahead of time and add extra layers. Normally it stays hidden, never affecting your daily life. It will only appear when you're attacked, or when you actively call it forth. Pretty cool, huh? Only then did Sebastian understand the significance of stacking spells, infinitely increasing defense, and you can prepare it ahead of time. This could be incredibly powerful. It's like an invisible protective item that can be continuously strengthened. Gryffindor, huh? From now on, I'm calling this spell Swann. Gryffindor beamed, seeing Sebastian nodding eagerly, he stroked his beard, then teased Sebastian. Okay, maestro. Time to see your imitation.